Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Jedi Guybrarian Holocron show. We are getting very close to the end, or should I say to the rise of Skywalker. Let's start by reading about Palpatine discovering that Rey and Ben form a dyad in the Force. This happens on page 222. The Emperor gasped, stared at his hands, which had begun knitting themselves back together, bones regrowing, pale flesh closing over them. "The life force of your bond," he said, his voice tinged with wonder. "A dyad in the Force!" His gleeful, triumphant thoughts washed over Rey as she struggled against his grip, unable to move. He had won, at last. All those years, all that searching, he'd tried to create a dyad with Anakin, as his master had tried to create one with him. The rule of two, a master always in desperate search of a yet more powerful apprentice, was a pale imitation, an unworthy but necessary successor to the older, purer doctrine of the dyad. "Unseen for generations," he crowed, "and now the power of two restores the one true Emperor." He raised his perfect healed hands and called on all the dark power of the Force and the Sith who had come before him, and he pulled their life from their very bodies. It poured from them like a river of light, leaving them weaker and weaker. The Emperor laughed as his body strengthened, became whole. According to Wikipedia, a dyad in the Force is an extremely rare occurrence when two powerfully Force-sensitive beings share a unique Force bond with each other, connecting their minds across space and time. This lets them communicate with each other across great distances, have a clear sense of what the other feels, and if powerful enough, who knows what they could do. Generations before the rise of Skywalker story, an ancient prophecy foretold the coming of a dyad in the Force. Palpatine's old Sith master Darth Plagueis actually tried to create a dyad between himself and Palpatine, which he believed was connected to the Sith belief in the rule of two, but Plagueis' attempt was unsuccessful. This mention of the rule of two is a text-to-text connection with many other stories. Three that I can think of right now are The Phantom Menace, in which Yoda mentions it at the funeral scene near the end, the three-part novel series about Darth Bane that tells us of the beginnings of the rule of two, and the Rise of Skywalker Visual Encyclopedia points out ancient Sith runes that describe the rule of two and a dyad in the Force in a very similar way. Palpatine and the Sith thought it would be two Sith to become this dyad from the prophecy. Wikipedia states that what the Sith did not understand is that a dyad cannot be created between dark side users. What is really being prophesied is a balance of the Force created between the light and the darkness, between Rey and Ben. Meanwhile, there is a space battle conflict going on simultaneously, and I want to point out a couple of very sad losses, starting on page 223. "This is it," Snap Wexley called from inside his X-Wing. He fired and felt a surge of exultation when the belly cannon lit up like a fireworks display. He'd gotten pretty good at this. All those lessons with his stepfather Wedge had paid off. But he didn't see the other tie, the one that came out of nowhere. "Snap!" Poe yelled. He had just enough time to reach down for the tiny hollow that he kept on his dash and whisper, "Kare," before everything exploded with unbearable light. Wow, Snap Wexley has been an awesome character in several Star Wars stories, so this is a heavy loss. And in his final moments, he thinks of his stepfather, Wedge Antilles, a classic character who has been around since the original Star Wars A New Hope came out. And Snap's last words spoken is his wife's name, Kare, who is also featured in other Star Wars stories. Sadly, we also lose the classic starship Tantive 4, Leia's ship, which we've seen featured in Revenge of the Sith, Rogue One, A New Hope, and many other Star Wars stories. Poe watched in horror as raw power shot up from the planet like a massive geyser, devouring everything in its path. Several fighters were suddenly adrift, their controls no longer responding. The Tantive 4 trembled. It listed to the side and began to drop. Poe wanted to look away. Leia's ship! He clenched his jaw and stared anyway. He would bear witness to this. The trembling intensified. One of the engines detonated. Explosions spread out along the hull, and suddenly the Tantive 4 was dropping like a meteor, past the Final Order fleet and out of sight. Poe had just lost a lot of friends. He'd known Nyan Num his whole life. Yes, sadly, when the Tantive 4 goes down, we also lose Nyan Num as well, a beloved character who has fought against the forces of darkness since all the way back in Return of the Jedi. However, the good news is that help is on the way. Help from all over the galaxy. It was Lando. He was back. But had he brought anyone with him? Poe's heart leapt in his chest as he flipped his fighter around, swooped over the hull of a destroyer to get a visual on the atmosphere above. He gasped. Ships were popping into sight all over the place. Freighters, fighters, medical frigates, long haulers from every sector of the galaxy, from every era Poe had ever heard of. Hundreds, no thousands, a fleet of fleets. The comms erupted as ship after ship began calling in. Thousands of resolved voices crying out, refusing to be silenced. Phantom Squadron standing by. Ghost standing by. Anodyne 2 standing by. Poe was not the crying type, but as everyone called in, one after another, liquid pooled in his eyes. They had done it. The spark of the resistance had become a fire. Alphabet 2 standing by. Zay Versio with Inferno Squad standing by. Look at all these ships. Fireball here. Hi, everyone. Cut the chatter, Kaz, a deep voice responded. Okay, Poe interrupted, because they had no time for 100,000 ships to keep calling in. Lando whooped as he and Chewie charged ahead, and 1,000 fighters, frigates, and even well-armed freighters swooped after them. Within seconds, the Millennium Falcon had taken out a cannon. That ship made everything look easy. Nice flying, Lando, came Wedge Antilles' voice, and Poe realized the old Rebellion captain and his former flight instructor was operating one of the Falcon's turret stations. He wished Leia could be here to see this. I just love this moment where help comes from all over the galaxy as people band together to stop the evil. And that's a powerful theme of good people working together to make a positive difference. When the author writes thousands of resolved voices crying out, refusing to be silenced, that's not only a powerful message of everyone having a voice to stand up against evil, but it's an amazing text-to-text connection back to the original Star Wars A New Hope, when the Empire uses the Death Star to destroy Alderaan.
I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced.
Now thousands of voices are crying out because they refuse to be silenced. I really feel like there's a powerful text-to-world connection here too, because at the time of this video recording, in June 2020, there are people marching together against systemic racism in our country and trying to make real changes to improve society and save lives. And at the same time, there are people agreeing to wear face masks, to social distance, to wash their hands and disinfect their surroundings, all to protect one another from the dangerous COVID-19 virus and save lives. Whether in real life or a sci-fi fantasy novel, good people can work together to make a positive difference. Okay, now really quickly, we've got to talk about all these amazing text-to-text connections that happen when all these ships and characters start showing up to help. Here are just who some of them are. Phantom Squadron is connected to the Aftermath trilogy by Chuck Wendig. Ghost is the ship connected to the Star Wars Rebels characters. Anodyne 2 is connected to The Last Jedi. Alphabet 2 is connected to Alphabet Squadron by Alexander Freed. Zay Versio and Inferno Squad are from the Battlefront 2 video game and the book from Christy Golden. The Fireball and Kaz are from Star Wars Resistance. And Wedge Antilles is a classic character from the original trilogy and many other books, including the X-Wing series. His stepson, Snap, sadly just lost his life in this battle, but Wedge has arrived to fight the forces of evil once again. And while the gathering of all these Star Wars characters turns the conflict in space toward the side of the Resistance, the conflict between Palpatine and Rey is about to bring together a group of Star Wars characters too. On page 230, as Palpatine is feeling invincible with power, Rey hears the voices of the Jedi, encouraging her and filling her with the power to stop him once and for all. Through the calm came a voice. "These are your final steps, Rey. Rise and take them." Then others joined. They'd been with her all along. She just needed to learn how to hear them, like Leia had promised. More voices came at her, fast but gentle, as though she lay at a confluence of the Force. Possibilities, futures, and pasts, all stretching away from her, or maybe leading toward her. Bring back the balance, Rey. In the night, find the light, Rey. Alone? Never have you been. Every Jedi who ever lived lives in you. The Force surrounds you. Let it guide you, as it guided us. Palpatine had wanted Rey for himself, but she chose to be their conduit, their vessel. She was a Jedi. Rey moved an arm, then a shoulder. She let the voices surround her, fill her, strengthen her. She turned over, placed a palm to the ground, pushed up. We stand behind you. Rise in the Force. She got a knee beneath her, leveraged herself up onto her toes. Rey paused, crouched, gasping for air. Her muscles didn't want to obey. Every movement turned her very bones to knives of pain. In the heart of a Jedi lies her strength. The voices were becoming louder, even more powerful. Rise! Rise! Luke's voice became deep and insistent, rising above all the others, a well of power from which to draw. Rey, the Force will be with you. Always. She rose, summoned Luke's lightsaber, which skidded across the stone and smacked into her hand. The blade ignited, and Rey stood, full of strength, freely given to her by those who had come before. The Emperor gasped. The avalanche of light from his fingertips ceased. He rose from his throne and stepped forward. His eyes glowed with lingering power. Let your death be the final word in the story of rebellion. Palpatine reached with his arms, sent force lightning zagging toward her. She whipped up her lightsaber and blocked it. The impact nearly knocked her from her feet, but she reached for the Force and stood her ground. His attack intensified. "You are nothing," he yelled. "A scavenger girl is no match for the power in me. I am all the Sith." Her wrist felt like it was going to break, but it wouldn't. Not today. "And I," she said, reaching for more strength, for Leia's lightsaber. It clicked into her hand. "I am all the Jedi." She brought the second lightsaber to bear, crossing its blade with the first, creating an impenetrable shield. Rey stepped forward, pushing back against his onslaught. Then again. Every step was anguish. It was taking everything the Jedi had given her, everything she had. The lightning began to feed back onto the Emperor. It ravaged his face, and he tossed back his head in agony and in denial of what was happening. Rey pursued, one foot in front of the other, absorbing power from the Force. Finally, she was ready. She gathered her strength, her faith in the Jedi past, her love of her friends, and she thrust it all at the Emperor. He staggered backward, his own power reflected against him. It devoured him completely, ripping away his newly healed fingers, searing away the skin of his face, his very bones, until he disintegrated. What remained of him coalesced into a single point, which then exploded with a massive shockwave that threw Rey to the ground. The Sith throne shattered. The ceiling bouldered down around her, crushing thousands of disciples in the amphitheater. Okay, first I want to look at the way Rey Carson's diction, her word choices, help show Rey gaining strength. She uses words like energy, moved, strengthened, pushed up, stand, rise, rising, louder, full, power, powerful, thrust, stood her ground, impenetrable, pushing back, ready, faith, love. While at the same time, the author uses these word choices to describe the Emperor. Ceased, ravaged, agony, staggered backward, devoured, ripping away, searing away, bones, collapsing, shattered, crushing, disintegrated. Excellent examples of how the words or diction that a writer chooses to describe characters can actually let you feel whether the character is getting stronger or weaker, whether the character will win or lose. I also love the theme that's connected to Rey, the theme of you get to choose who to be. This will come up again at the very end of the story, and it is a very important message. It doesn't really matter who her creepy grandfather is or what he wanted her to turn into, because she can choose to reject his evil and be with the Jedi as her family instead. And just who are all those Jedi characters who came through the Force to strengthen Rey and join with her to defeat the Emperor and the Sith cult? Well, according to Wikipedia, they are Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn, Ahsoka Tano, Yoda, Mace Windu, Kanan, Luminara, Adi Gallia, Ayla Secura, Luke Skywalker, and Anakin Skywalker. And I tried to show you just some of the other Star Wars novels that feature those Jedi characters. Also, this scene of the Jedi of the past coming to help her is a great text-to-text moment with other fantasy adventure stories, such as Return of the King, when Aragorn is helped in battling against evil by spirits of dead warriors, or in Harry Potter, books 4 and 7, where Harry is helped by the spirits of those who have passed. Or even in Mulan, where the spirits of her ancestors help her. You could even think of the ancient Jedis helping the young hero as a mythical archetype, going all the way back to stories in ancient myths where the gods would aid the hero to defeat the evil. Okay, that's all for now. We only have a few pages left in chapter 18, and then chapter 19 is the final chapter of the novel. Until next time, may the Force and reading be with you.